Hi guys, Sean here from digiDirect. Today we're stuck indoors due to rain, but we're going to be checking out the new Sony RX0. Now this is an interesting new product that I think is going to appeal to some people, but not to some others. It has the form factor very similar to a GoPro, but it has the insides of an RX series camera like an RX100 or an RX10. Now we're going to discuss the features of the camera, but then we're going to have a discussion about who this camera is meant for, because I think for this product that's a pretty important discussion to have. For example, I've already made the comparison to GoPro, but I think it would be a mistake to consider that this camera is aimed at the exact same market that a GoPro is, for example. But we'll get to that. Let's start with a look at the body of the camera. So as I've just mentioned, this has a similar form factor to a GoPro in that it's a small, rectangular, rugged style camera. It's shockproof to 2 meters, waterproof to 10 meters or 33 feet without a case. You can get cases as well in order to bring it deeper. It has a tripod mount in the bottom, and you can use this to adapt to a variety of different mounts, things that you might be familiar with from other action cameras. The lens is in the exact center of the camera, the front, and on the top we have the power and the record buttons. On the back here we've got a nice screen so you can see what the camera is shooting, and it's a nice bright high-resolution screen. That's always handy to have, and that's not always present on small cameras like these. Around the screen we've got a number of buttons that control navigation throughout the menus, control your shooting settings, playback, and so on. And we also have two small covers, one that holds the battery and one that has your SD card slot, HDMI and USB ports, and a microphone port. So inside this camera is the heart of a Sony RX100. It's got the same 1-inch size sensor that the RX100 has, which is much larger than any other action cam sensor. So that's going to give you much better picture quality coming out of this camera than most other action cams. It's also going to be a lot better in low light. So a big emphasis that we'll see here on the quality coming out of this camera. That carries over into the lens. This is a Zeiss designed f4 lens with a 35mm field of view. Very, very high quality lens. And the fact that it's a 35mm field of view is a more normal field of view than most action cams, which have a very wide and somewhat distorted look to them, generally speaking. That means the footage from this camera is going to be easier to integrate with other footage that are not shot on an action cam style camera. It also has Sony's excellent S-Log2 picture profile in here, which is their very flat picture profile intended for color grading. It doesn't look great coming out of the camera, it's kind of grayish, but it gives you way more latitude in post-production when you're grading the footage to make it look a lot different, do a lot of different things with the footage, which is definitely something that most action cams do not do well with. So another distinction here. You can also control up to 5 of these cameras at once via the Sony Play Memories app, and Sony is working on a device that will let you control 15 at one time. So definitely we can see that they're making some effort to make this different than a standard action camera in terms of the quality and the way that you would use it, the post-production flow, and so on. It can also shoot up to 1,000 frames per second slow-mo footage with this camera, although you do see noticeable degradation in the image quality when you shoot at that speed. You're probably going to want to keep it at a more moderate rate, maybe 250 or so, but still some good slow-mo options on here. And in terms of still photos, it can shoot up to 16 frames per second raw photos. Now those are all great features, but now we get to my biggest criticism of this camera, and that's the fact that it does not have internal 4K video recording. Now it does have external 4K. You can output 4K via the HDMI port, so if you have an external recorder attached, you can record 4K that way. But that kind of, in my opinion at least, defeats the purpose of such a small waterproof camera. If you've got an external recorder on it, it's not really small anymore. And you can't really use it as a waterproof camera because you've got the port open, you've got cables and so on. So I really do wish it had internal 4K. I think that would have made a big difference, but it is what it is. Okay, so now we know the features of this camera. Let's have a discussion about who this camera is for. In a number of Sony's marketing materials for the camera, they've shown it kitted out on a rig, like a shoulder rig with an external microphone on it and an external recorder on it. As I've just mentioned, I don't think that makes a lot of sense because if you're kitting it out like that, you kind of negate the size of it and the waterproof nature of it. You might as well just use an RX100 or an A6300 or an A7 or whatever. On the other side of the coin, for a casual user who's looking for something like a GoPro, a competitor to that, I'm also not sure that this fits the bill. It's more expensive, can't record internal 4K. It does have better picture quality, but it may not be worth it. Some of the features like the S-Log2 picture profile are not going to be used by a casual user. So I'm not sure that it's really a GoPro competitor, or at least primarily that it's a GoPro competitor as well. In my opinion, this is really aimed at people who need a small, rugged camera that has much better picture quality coming out of it than a standard action cam, so it can be interspersed with footage from other cameras easily. It can be shot in the S-Log2 picture profile, so the footage has a lot more leeway in when it comes to post-production and color grading. and people who are able to use an external recorder if they need to capture 4K. In my opinion, that points the camera directly at the industry segment of the market, not so much consumers. Because like I said, consumers can look at other options, but there's a lot of unique situations where a studio or a filmmaker might need a camera that fills these very specific requirements, and in that case, the RX0 is a great choice because within those parameters, it's a very good camera. The picture quality is excellent, the S-Log2 is very, very good. It's just that those are fairly narrow parameters. And that's fine. Not every camera needs to be, a mass-produced thing that every consumer needs to have, and that's not going to be what this is. Not everyone's going to have an RX0. But I think because of the form factor similarity to GoPro, I think a lot of people maybe think that, so I thought it was an important distinction to make. But overall, the RX0 is a very strong camera if you're operating within its, the parameters where it excels at. And if you have a need for a camera like this, I think it'll do very, very well for you. I just don't think that everyone will have that need. Now, if you're interested in this camera and you'd like to have a play, come into one of our stores. We've got stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, Chatswood, the Brisbane and Melbourne CBD, and Cannington, Western Australia. You can also order the RX0 on our website at www.digidirect.com.au. Thanks, guys. Take care.